Hi guys.
Hi.
Welcome to Blue Stockings.
Thanks.
For those of you who are new to the store, Blue Stockings is a collectively owned, volunteer-powered bookstore, cafe, and activist center. We have events almost every night of the week, and you can sign up for our email list at the counter. For our events, we have a sliding scale donation of $5, but if you can give more or less or nothing, that's cool. It helps keep us open. Or you can support us by buying books, including Paradise Lost, which is on the counter. So I'm going to pass this around. So tonight we have Brook Wilensky-Lanford, the author of Paradise Lost, Searching for the Garden of Eden. Her essays and reviews have been published in Salon, The Huffington Post, Killing the Buddha, and Andrei Kudresku's The Exquisite Corpse. She lives in the Garden State, and you can read more at brookwilensky-lanford.com. So please join me in welcoming Brook.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. And thank you to Sunny Daly, who first put me in touch with the wonderful folks at Blue Stockings, who made it all happen. So I'm going to do, can you guys hear me? It's not too far away. Okay. So this book, Paradise Lost, Searching for the Garden of Eden, is the true story of people who've looked for the Garden of Eden on Earth since the late 19th century and going all the way through today. So each chapter, there's 14 chapters, I believe, each take place in a different time. So they follow a different character and a different idea of where the Garden of Eden is. So they take you to totally different worlds. There's a garden for everybody. But what I want to do is read from the prologue and give you an overview of the project and how it came about, and then introduce you to one of these wacky characters, and then leave time for plenty of questions, which I hope you have. Okay. In the beginning, I was just following a family rumor. Sometime in 2004, my father told me that my great-uncle William had been looking for the Garden of Eden. William had died in 1971, before I was born, and all I knew about him was that he had lived on the Upper East Side of Manhattan and was a highly regarded allergist at Columbia University's Medical Center, where his father, a member of the National Academy of Sciences, had discovered the structure of vitamin B1. Most of my father's relatives were practicing scientists. If they really thought they could find a biblical place on the rational earth, the news was surprising, to say the least. I had to know more. Was it all a joke? Where was the Garden of Eden supposed to be? How were they going to get there? Did they make the trip? What did they find? My father didn't know, so I tracked down William's daughter Phoebe, my second cousin, who told me that the rumors were true. Her father had been looking for the Garden of Eden. Phoebe's parents had both been interested in archaeology and frequently visited the collections of antiquities at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Sometime in the 1950s, when Phoebe was a young girl, William and his cousin Dallas Sherman, a dashing Pan Am pilot, had hatched a plan to go to Eden to, quote, fly around the suspected area and look for signs of the site. Phoebe didn't remember where the suspected area was or what the signs of the site were supposed to be, and anyway, the plan never materialized. Needless to say, she wrote to me, nothing happened beyond what I would have called cocktail chatter. I admit my heart sank when I heard they never flew to Eden. But something had happened. They had believed that there was a place to search for. This was a mystery. If I'd thought about it at all, I'd assumed that people had stopped believing the Garden of Eden was a real place somewhere back in the Middle Ages, or certainly once the theory of evolution began to show that man had not been created all at once in a place mentioned in the Bible. Apparently not. William and his family had belonged to the venerable Brick Presbyterian Church and Dallas to St. Bartholomew's Episcopal, both of them on Park Avenue. These were surely not the kind of churches that required belief in a literal six-day creation. And yet, my great-uncle still believed in the Garden of Eden. I tried to find Dallas Sherman to see if he could help me understand how this was possible. I did find another elderly airplane pilot named Dallas Sherman, who told me wonderful mistaken identity stories about my great-uncle's cousin, who, he just heard, had recently passed away. The trail seemed to have gone cold, but I couldn't get the story out of my head. I imagined the two of them, William and Dallas, sitting down with a martini at the Union Club, loosening their ties and mapping the book of Genesis on a cocktail napkin. Perhaps an olive reminded them of the forbidden fruit and the tree of knowledge. Sticklers for scientific accuracy, they might have noticed that the Bible never says apple, just fruit. I could almost hear William discussing what species of fruit Adam and Eve might have eaten in the same matter-of-fact tone he would have used to discuss hypersensitivity mechanisms in management, which is the topic of his thesis. My hyper-rational relatives still held out the possibility that science could find the Garden of Eden in the 1950s. Proving that the apple, or fruit, does not fall far from the tree, I too looked first to science. There must be some reasonable explanation. Some archaeological find must have been uncovered, some new scroll translated, it must have been in all the papers, it must have been huge. Maybe with a little digging of my own, I could figure out what this major discovery was and where. Maybe then I could imagine William and Dallas out of the Union Club and onto a plane. I began with a subject search in the library catalog for Garden of Eden. There were far too many titles to skim quickly, so I narrowed it down to books published after Darwin's On the Origin of Species in 1859 and before my Uncle William's death in 1971. That didn't help. Lo and behold, the Garden of Eden had been found in Iraq, Turkey, Sri Lanka, Mongolia, the Seychelles, Florida, California, Missouri, and Ohio, at the North Pole, under the Mediterranean near Crete, in Sweden, the Persian Gulf, and Egypt. And that list only goes back to the late 19th century. No sooner did one authoritative account come along than another popped up to supplant it. Archaeologists did have theories, but so did college presidents, military officials, country preachers, and ordinary citizens. And every single one of them claimed he could prove, scientifically, that his was the one perfect spot described in the book of Genesis. How could I tell whom to believe? I kept reading. Books, pamphlets, academic journals, newspaper articles. Want to get into Garden of Eden for $1.10? Garden of Eden, its position on the globe definitely located. Were there 2 Gardens of Eden or only one? And of course, Paradise Found. Most of these works, I noticed, belonged only to the local library of their author. I found myself calling manifestos out of cold storage in Ohio and asking the University of Hong Kong to digitize crumbling memoirs for me. Columbia University had a non-circulating copy of the British engineer Sir William Wilcox's 1919 book on Eden, but it was still classified as an engineering title. So I was required to read From the Garden of Eden to the Crossing of the Jordan in the engineering library, next to exhausted undergraduates studying biomedicine or atomic energy. I wished I could have heard the theories out loud from their authors, the way their first audiences did, in grand theaters, elite clubs, and tiny churches. Some books arrived still bearing the literal marks of their creators, the next best thing. There was a greeting typed on letterhead from Boston University President William Warren to his colleague at Union Theological Seminary, requesting $2 payment for this copy of Paradise Found. Say Swantai's 1914 pamphlet, The Real Situation of Eden and the Origin of the Chinese, tastefully library bound in red, came with a bilingual English-Chinese map tucked in the back. The route of Noah after the flood was inked across Mongolia in the author's own minute, spidery hand. Such traces of obsession proved contagious. How could someone possibly be so sure that they knew where Noah went after the flood? I became just as determined to understand the Eden seekers as they had been to put Eden on the map. They all began with Genesis, chapters 2, verses 10 to 14, the Bible's maddeningly terse geographical description of Eden, so I did too. A river flows out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it divides and becomes 4 branches. The name of the first is Pishon. It is the one that flows around the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. Bdellium and onyx stone are there. The name of the second river is Gihon. It is the one that flows around the whole land of Cush. The name of the third river is Tigris, which flows east of Assyria, and the 4th river is the Euphrates. The Bible sounded positively nonchalant. If you can pinpoint the 4 rivers, you can locate paradise. In fact, many Eden seekers claimed that the unusually matter-of-fact description was the reason they decided to look for Eden to begin with. It just sounded like a real place. Upon closer inspection, however, problems arose. Everyone knows that the Tigris and Euphrates run from Turkey through Iraq, ending in the Persian Gulf, but no one knows for sure where the rivers Pishon or Gihon are or were. The details don't necessarily help make sense of things. The biblical algebra reached a level of detail that boggled my mind, which lacked training in Greek, Hebrew, or ancient geography. So I decided to back up, to find out where the search itself had begun, who had first decided that Eden could be found. Not surprisingly, it's a very old story with innumerable branches. What accounts for the amazing persistence of the quest? If the search for Eden is a centuries-long epic novel, the post-Darwin chapter is a major plot twist. For the first time, anyone seeking Eden did so in full knowledge that this garden did not mean the same thing to everybody. Was it the origin of species or paradise lost? No longer could seekers count on their audience's familiarity with Augustine, Josephus, and Calvin. Seekers might claim demurely that they just happened to read the names of those 4 rivers in Genesis and, much to their own surprise, came up with the location of Eden. But really, nobody stumbled upon the Pishon and the Gihon. Those who looked for Eden always had an urgent reason for doing so, even if they kept it to themselves. They would have to answer at least 2 questions. Not only where was Eden, but more important, what was Eden? And answer they would. Eden is part paradise, but only part. Really, the story is much bigger. Eden is supposed to tell us where we came from, what we've done wrong, and where we go from here. No wonder we keep looking. So I'm going to introduce you to the first character in the book, who's one of the most reputable characters, and his theory is one of the most wacky. So he's a great place to start. In the beginning, millions of years ago, the Lord God planted a garden northward in Eden. There was an abundance of sunlight, sequoias, and electricity, and all the biological conditions were most favorable. William Fairfield Warren did not look like a candidate to discover the location of the Garden of Eden. He wasn't an explorer. He stood only 5'6" when he stood at all. In his role as the first president of Boston University, he spent much of his time sitting behind his desk, speaking with faculty, students, trustees in a soft, husky voice. Though he was only 40 when appointed to the position, his pale, bespectacled face, framed by thinning gray hair and a trim beard, made him look much older. Known as a diplomat, Warren insisted on perfect courtesy and friendship between faculty and students, and he held the job for 30 years. But Warren was also a trained Methodist minister, and he continued teaching in the School of Theology throughout his tenure as president. In his classroom, behind the podium, William Warren seemed to grow. His usually restrained speaking voice became louder and more resonant. His prominent forehead began to flush. He made bad jokes. He had a penchant for creating and acting out fake Socratic dialogues and reciting long passages from Emerson. And instead of playing the courteous diplomat, Warren became a defender of the faith. The faith needed defending after 1859, when the post-Darwin furor over human origins was in full blaze. Evolution suggested that man had ascended over time from our less intelligent and more animalistic primate origins. Christianity had been insisting for millennia that man had descended through original sin from near divine heights in the Garden of Eden to the miserable, depraved society of the late 19th century. Warren's own faith never wavered, but his position had him trapped. As a modern man, the president of a major university, he knew science was coming, but his Methodist theology required humans to be sinners, always reaching backward toward a more perfect Edenic past. How could he maintain both points of view? He refused to take the easy way, to shake the Bible in the face of the heathens. Dogmatic, over-anxious defense of Christianity was, to his mind, worse than no defense at all. Besides, he'd served as a missionary himself in Germany, and he knew those blunt tactics wouldn't work. Make transparent arguments based on a literal reading of the Bible, Warren warned, and you'll fatally disgust many an ingenious mind.